Hi everyone, welcome back to the Scrap Zone. I'm Julie, and in today's video, I'm going to show you how I created this beautiful workshop using the Sweet as Honey paper collection from Close to My Heart. Now let's dive right in because I've got lots to share with you today. So let's take a look at this gorgeous paper. Now you've got this coordinating sticker sheet that are fabulous. And then look at this paper, isn't it pretty? Now it's definitely something different for me to play with, but I kind of feel like it has a nice vintage look to it, even though there's a lot of bees on it. I am going to bring in these layered flowers, and I'm going to share with you a very easy technique, smooshing technique. I'm going to use watercolor paper, but I'm also going to bring in just regular cardstock. So here I'm showing you the colors that I'll be using today. So I'm going to use like oranges for the large flowers and yellows for the small, and then these nice greens here. So it's going to be easy for you to differentiate between the watercolor paper and the regular cardstock because it's 12 inches long. So let's get started with this technique. I am using my all-purpose mat, and I'm going to start here with antique linen, only because I felt that the spice marmalade, the orange, was actually kind of bright. So the antique linen will dull this down. So you see that I'm adding a few colors to the mat. I'm going to bring in just a tiny bit of vintage photo, and I'm just going to add quite a bit of water here on my first pass. And you can see those colors kind of really popping off the all-purpose mat. I like to mix them up. I don't know if it's necessary or not, but I think I came across a situation where I had like kind of like a little square image and I didn't like that. So I like to mix them up, but you do get inky, definitely. So I'm going to start on the smooth side of the watercolor paper, and this is my first impression, which is not that great, right? So I'm going to keep on going, and I'm going to pick up as much ink as I can with the water. I'm just kind of moving my cardstock around, and this is my first go, so I'm not entirely sure what it's going to look like, but I know that it's kind of yellow. It's not there's not as much orange as I wanted, and here I'm kind of picking up the rest with the cardstock, which I'm not really giving the cardstock a fair trial here because there's not as much water, but you'll see along the way how the cardstock reacts and how the watercolor reacts. So I'm going to dry it here because the trick when you're doing smooshing with Distress Oxide inks is that you kind of have to dry it in between, and you're kind of building up your layers. So I'm going to add more orange because definitely I wanted orange for the larger flowers. There we go. We've got some orange there going on. I'm going to add a little bit more water. So with the watercolor paper, you kind of get a chance to play with it a little bit more, and you can add more water to it. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to put a little bit more vintage photo, a little bit more orange, because that's what I'm trying to achieve here. And I do mix them up, and I do get really, really inky. I don't mind. It's kind of fun sometimes. So we're going to go again. And I'm picking up quite a bit of color now. And you can see that the color is building on that piece. I'm going to do the same here with the cardstock. And I'm just going to keep on going until I'm happy with it. So I'm not going to show you the entire process, but I did do maybe 4, maybe 5 passes, and in between I would dry them, and this is what you end up with. So here you've got the cardstock, and you can tell that the orange didn't pop as much. Here it's still wet, but you can see that it's a lot more vibrant. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to do the yellow for the smaller flowers. And again, this mustard seed color is quite bright. I'm going to add a little bit of water, and I'm just going to repeat the process. And yeah, I do mix them up. I'm not sure if this is necessary, but I kind of like doing it. I don't mind getting messy. So these are the colors that I'm using right here. And you can see that I did add quite a bit more water, and that yellow was really, really sunshine yellow, and I kind of wanted to mute it down. And I really like the way that this turned out. You see all the different layers of colors that were built one on top of each other. So these are the orange ones, which I did these 4 colors right here. And that antique linen color really kind of mutes that orange a tiny little bit, and I find that it works best with the paper. So let's take a look here. So I've got my orangey color, my yellow. I've brought out my papers. I'm liking the direction we're going in. So let's continue on with the leaves. Now I could have made them black, but I thought, no, I want to make them green. So I pulled out mowed lawn, peel paint, a little bit of vintage photo, and again I brought in that antique linen, and it kind of dulls down that really bright green, which is the mowed lawn. I'm going to mix them up here, and you can tell that I've added a lot more ink on my surface, and I'm going to use the smooth side again. I'm going to smoosh that right inside, and I'm just going to keep on playing with this. Now, if you're a pro at ink smushing and you don't want to see this entire process, I will have chapters down in the description below, and it will take you to each of the layouts that I'm doing in this video. So I'm really liking this green, but I'm also showing you that you do need to dry your ink in between your layers, and that's what gives it that nice buildup of different colors. So here I'm just going ahead and showing you the results on just regular cardstock. The green actually showed up nicer than the orange, but there is a slight difference. So I guess the difference for me was that on regular cardstock, it's kind of more muted, and on the watercolor paper, you just get so much more definition. You can see it right here. So I really like the way that that turned out. So when I was looking at all of my finished little products here, I thought, you know what, I think I'm missing something. But let's take a look at all of them. So this is the yellow, which is very similar to the cardstock because it kind of blends in more to the cardstock. If I'm looking back at my paper, there's a lot of black in this paper. So let's bring in some black soot. And I'm going to go ahead here and I'm just going to add some splatters to all of my pieces. So I'm just wetting the brush, putting a lot of water on my surface, and I'm just tapping here. As I'm tapping, I'm feeling that these are a little bit big. These splatters are kind of big on my small piece here, and you can definitely control your splatters, the size of them that is, if you use something to tap with. So here I'm tapping with my bone folder, and you can tell that the splatters are much smaller. They're not as big. The other thing that's actually kind of neat is because I'm using Distress Oxide ink, it's not a true black, so it's going to blend into that background really, really nicely, and it's not going to fight with the paper patterns that I'm working with. So just one last color here to address, and this one here looks really, really good. I like all of the patterns, I like all of the texture. Alright, so finished products, we've got 2 of the orange, 1 of the yellow. Those are going to be for the flowers, so the big ones are going to be orange, the small ones are going to be yellow, and then I'm going to bring in my green, and I'm going to use those little leaves on the thin cut right here. With the magic of video, they're all done. They're all ready for you to see. So the reason why I cut those into 6-inch wide strips is because it's much easier to run it through your embossing machine, or your die cutting machine, I should say. So here you've got about 15 of those. Here, because I knew I wanted more, I ended up with 8 large flowers, and then I wasn't going to waste that paper, so I decided to add 1 here, 2, 3, 4, so another 8 little orange flowers. I'm sure I'll use them. This one here was tricky because I really had to squish them in there, and I believe I have 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I did some partial die cutting. You probably would like to do maybe 3 of the greens so you have extras, but let's dive into this paper and add these beautiful flowers. Now I've gone ahead and I've cut everything, and this is what I have left out of my paper pack, and these here are leftover flowers, but that's fine. I can make cards with that. I always prefer to have extra than to run out. So this is the first layout that you see down below, and I'm just showing you that the back of these small flowers was done with the pattern paper, and then we're going to add this little black dot right in the center. And I think that looks really good. Like, it's got that vintage character to it. This is the second layout. So again, all of those pieces have been cut. I'm pretty sure I'm going to use those banners right here at the top with these really nice strips off the sticker sheet. So when I do these workshop, I tend to map things out if you want. I separate the papers, I separate the flowers, just to make sure that I have enough and that I use as much as I can of the papers, and then I'm done with it. I can move on to something else. So let's start the assembly of layout number 1. So layout number 1, and I'm going to skip through a few of these things, but for layout number 1, I'm just going to show you that the reason why they call these layered flowers, this specific die that I'm using right here, they layer up really, really nicely. They've got these really distinct petals, and you don't have to fuss and flip them over and over and over until they fit together. They just fit really nicely. So I like to use liquid glue, and then I just kind of hide them under a block just to make sure that everything is nice and dry. The larger flowers here, I decided to back them with it's shortbread cardstock, and it's on the light side, and I think that that gives that particular flower a really nice look. So I'm just going to put my block on there to make sure that it's nice and secure, and then I just use my tweezers, and I'm using one of the centers. Like, there's tons of different centers that you can use for these flowers. This one's a little stitched one, and I'm just going to pop that right into the center of the flower. And to finish them all off, I'm going to add a little bit of distressing on the edges. So you can see here that I'm not really rubbing, I'm actually pouncing the tool on the edge, and it just gives a really nice, complete look. As for the leaves, I'm just doing the leaves a little bit here with black. I'm not touching the stems because there's no need for that. And these ones here, I'm doing the same. I'm just kind of pouncing the tools on the end, or the tool on the end, I should say. And I just find that they pop more off the page. All right. Of course, my camera was off for this. That's okay. I'll show you when I'll repeat this on the right hand side. So I did use antique linen. I did spritz it with a little bit of water, and the reason why I did that was that my title wasn't really popping. It was too, like, the colors were too similar. But I do like the way the antique linen kind of gives a nice base, and then I love the way that the water lifted some of that oxide ink. So most of the pieces are distressed in one fashion or another. So here I'm using this distressing tool. I've had this in my stash forever and a day. If you don't have it, you can use scissors, but I would use the outer edge, or I would use old scissors. Don't use your brand new scissors because you're not going to like that. You're going to dull the blade. This here, I'm just running it on the cardstock, and because I'm using black cardstock with white core, you see the inside, and I can actually color that with the ink. So I'm not sure if it picked up on camera, but it looks really, really nice. All of these pieces were distressed, first with the tool, and then I added ink on all of them. So of course, this is the time that I decide, you know what, I think I need more splatters. Of course, splatters everywhere. I'm going to add it here on my little piece. This is just a cut piece of the all-purpose mat, and I'm adding just splatters at the top, not too much, but just a little bit of splatters to kind of finish off that look, and it's going to really help with my title. Now these guys here, I do like to shape flowers, but the layered flowers don't need a lot of shaping. They look good flat, but I thought I would just pinch up all of the leaves, and then I'm going to take my bone folder and I'm just going to curl them down just a tiny little bit. It just gives them a little bit of movement. So we're going to pop one right here. And then for the flowers themselves, I'm just kind of pulling back very gently on the petals just to curl them down a tiny little bit. Again, just to give them a little bit of shape, but they don't really need to be shaped. They look fine flat, but that's just something that I like to do. So I'm going to pop those right here at the top. So remember I told you my camera was off when I did this technique? Okay, so let me show you here on the right hand side. So I'm thinking I'm going to add some at the top and at the bottom. Now, you know what? I'm going to add it just right here at the top. And so I just use my distress tool, and I'm just using antique linen, and I'm just going to drag that across the page, or not across, but right at the top right here. So this is just standard ink blending right here at the top. I'm just double checking with my piece to make sure that I'm dragging it enough. And then I'm going to add water. So I'm spraying water inside the palm of my hand to create larger droplets of water. So I'm going to add a little bit more, and I'm going to let it do its magic. See how it's like really changing, like it's really picking up on the color. I'm just going to blot out the extra water. Now it looks a little bit different here because it is still wet, but once it's dried, it looks really, really good. So I'm just going to let this dry, and I'm going to add my splatters here with the black soot. Now that I know that this is something I want to do, so I'm adding here some here at the top and some right here at the bottom. So now that we've got our base pages done and all of the distressing and inking and flower assembly, let's assemble our pages. So I'm putting these two pieces here, and I've aligned them using the grid line of my pattern paper. Now let me show you here a little trick. You've probably seen this before, but it works really, really well for me. So I'm actually gently removing the negative part of my sticker. So this is my title, and I'm going to use this to align my title. So I'm going to remove the stickiness. I'm just going to use an anti-static tool, and then I can use the negative part on my base page right here and glue down my little alphabets if you want. So they weren't really popping, so I'm going to add a little bit more distressing. I think that that's going to look good. So I am using my tweezers just to make sure that it's nice and secured. And then I'm just going to pop all of my title alphabets here using the negative piece of the sticker. So you know that it's nice and straight, you've got the right distance, and it works like a charm. So there you go. I think that that looks really, really nice. So you've got a little bit of distressing in the back. I did add here those black flourishes. Those are stickers as well. And we're going to work right here on the cluster. So I always start with my little leaves. Well, not always, but in this case. And I'm going to add glue just on the stems. I'm not going to add any glue on the leaves themselves, just because it's going to give them a little bit more movement. So I'm going to tuck that underneath. I just want to make sure that it doesn't kind of hang off the top. We're going to do the same thing with this one right here. And all of the flowers have been popped using 3D foam tape, so regular 3D foam tape and thin 3D foam tape. It just gives you a little bit more dimension. So I'm going to add the last one right here. This one, actually I lied. This one is down using just regular glue, and you saw that I just added a little bit of glue on the one edge because I don't have my photo right now, so I didn't want that to be in the way. And this little sticker, I actually took the time to cut out. There was a large black frame around it, and I just felt that it was fighting a little bit with the flower cluster, so I just trimmed that off. I'm going to add this little one right here. And then I'm going to add these tiny little bees. I think that's what they are, little bee blobs. That's what I call them. There's a few of them on your sticker sheet, and you're going to wonder, what are those? Well, I think they're little bees, right? When you put them down, they look like they're flying away from the flowers. So this here wanted to kind of bring the camera in just a little bit closer and show you this is the inside of the large flower. And I felt that it really looked nice. It gave that cluster just another element, and it's the inside piece of the larger orange flowers. So I try and use most of my scraps. So I'm going to show you that again, just in case you didn't get that. So see, that's the center of the yellow flower, and I'm just going to cut it in half, and I'm going to tuck that underneath. I'm going to audition them and move them around because it's a cluster and you kind of have to play with it. And I'm going to add this last little black flourish right here on the side. And I think our page is done. There was a little gap right above the flower, and I didn't really like that, so I just popped in a little bee. And I think it looks pretty good. So this is the right hand side, and then of course I forgot to do a little bit of distressing. You will see in the still shot right here that I did add a few tags on the right hand side just to complete that look. So we are now working on layout number 2. Again, everything has been cut, and I'm just going to start moving my pieces around. I kind of picked where I wanted my flowers. I'm still going to back them using that, let's call it the paper print. I really liked it, actually. It looks really nice. I did some edge distressing, and then after that was done, I did some ink distressing. So you can use your scissors, as I mentioned before, but I would definitely use the outside edge, not the inside edge. I think you're going to ruin your scissor by doing that. And then I did a little bit of inking, and we're just going to pop those right on. You will notice that when you are doing that distressing technique that you end up with an odd little gap right here at the top. I didn't like that too much, so I thought, okay, let's bring in these really nice stickers. And I cut a piece of cardstock just a tiny bit bigger, and it kind of frames it, and it kind of creates a visual separation between the top piece and this strip right here. So it kind of gives it a little bit more definition, but it's not like too busy. So we're going to add those right at the top. And then when it was time to place those pennants, of course that print at the top is busy, so I thought, okay, let's bring in a little bit more distressing. So I am using antique linen, and I really like the way this turned out, because it really does look like an old piece of print that's been lying around for a while, and it just gives it a really nice background to those pennants. Now that I'm looking at it, they probably would look even better if they were popped with 3D foam tape. They would kind of pop off the page, but I'm still happy on the way they looked right now. So I'm going to add a little bit more distressing just to make sure that I've got some definition between the background paper and the pennants. And I like the way that turned out. So we're going to add our little cluster, or our large cluster. This is the page I think that's got the most flowers. So I started with my title, and it's been pop dot, like we've got 3D foam tape that's elevating it, and then I kind of worked my way up with the clusters and the flowers, and you see that I'm using regular foam tape or I'm adding them down. And this is when I decided to bring in the cork shapes, and these are really, really fun to play with. And you see how they fill in those little awkward spots on the page, and they just bring everything together. So I was quite happy with that. Remember when I told you at the beginning that I did some partial die cutting? Well, I did use one right here on the right hand side, and I'm going to add my little hexagon here in the cork. I think that that looks really good. So we are going to move along to layout number 3. So layout number 3, I don't know if you've noticed, but between number 2 and number 3, the amount of pattern paper is quite different because I was really trying to maximize that pack. So what I'm doing here is I'm preparing all my flowers, I'm preparing my card bases, I'm doing the edge distressing, the ink distressing, and I'm shaping my flowers. So I'm kind of getting all of the hard work done, if you want, and then I'm just going to pop all of those pieces on the page. So these 2 photo mats are 1/4 inch from the bottom and side and in between. And then I'm just trying to position my title, because I know that I want to add that other pattern paper. So I'm going to rip a piece of my base page right here. And I'm kind of struggling with it, to be honest with you, and I'll show you a much better way on the left side. You know, we do learn as we are putting our layouts together. So I'm just going to get all of those off for a minute, and then I'm just going to curl that in and rip it just to make sure that it's done the way that I like. Yes, I'm trying to control a rip. It worked. There you go. So I can pop that underneath. So I'm just going to glue that on the back side of the base page. And I think that looks really good. It's really going to highlight that flower cluster. So I'm going to, I still have a little piece right here. So I'm going to show you a better way on the right hand side. So I'm going to add my clusters, and they've been added to the page, and I used all of the little hearts that were on that embellishing, the cork embellishment. I'm going to add a little bit of distressing right here just to finish off that look. And then we're going to move to the right side of this layout. So I've gone ahead and I've glued all of those pieces down. And remember I told you I'm going to show you a better way to do some ripping, only because the piece I had left was kind of small, and I really wanted to make sure that I was in a little bit more control of the ripping that was going to happen. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm just using a water brush, and I'm adding water to the cardstock. You'll see here in a bit, you see that? And then you can just go ahead and gently rip that off, and it will follow the water line perfectly. So then I know that I've done exactly what I needed, which was a small bit, and it was controlled. I'm going to add here, I'm going to pull from this sheet, and I'm going to back the little heart in this hexagon because I think that that's going to look really cute. So I'm just going to trim that on all sides. So it just looks more finish, and it pops a little bit more on that page. So I'm going to add this right here at the top. And then I'm going to finish off with a little bit of distressing here because we want to finish that page. I'm going to add my little sentiment here with 3D foam tape. I'm going to add those little centers. I think that they really add to the cluster. I think that they look really, really nice. So I've got this cluster up here, and then Let's fix that, make sure it's nice and straight. This cluster right down here and my control ripped piece at the bottom. So this is done. This is the completion of 3 beautiful layouts using Sweet as Honey. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and if you're not a subscriber, I'd love for you to join my crafty community. I will link a couple of videos here that I think you're going to enjoy. Have yourself a fantastic day. Thanks for watching.